You're listening to the 14th source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are two overeducated, codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses in the episode for Friday, July 22nd, 2022. It's a lot of twos this week. That's exciting.
Yes.
4 twos. No, 3
2 twos.
Math is hard. 5 twos, technically. I don't know.
Too many twos.
What if binary was zeros and twos, Andrew?
Let's stop. Just stop. No, we're done.
Yeah, I'm breaking open the paradigm.
No.
I'm a visionary, is what they call me.
Man, you and Elon fucking Musk have a stupid idea and call yourself a visionary.
Oh, I have, yes.
Man, all right.
Anybody can call themselves visionaries.
Right. But if you start with a South African emerald mine money, you can make that vision a reality.
It's all about taking advantage of the tools available. Sometimes you have all the tools available.
Anyway, before I go into a rant, let's get this party started because we're here to talk about something super duper exciting. Well, I mean, I think it's super duper exciting. We're going to talk about the newest Marvel thing.
Is it?
Not the newest, actually. I guess not the newest. I don't know, like when you have a movie that comes out the same week as the TV show,
We're talking about TV show.
About the TV show. We're going to talk about Ms. Marvel, the newest show on Disney Positive, the newest show from the Marvel Cinematic Universe, whatever, telegraphic universe.
The Feigeverse.
The Feigeverse. We're going to talk, because it's a 6-episode series aired on Disney Plus over the last 6 weeks. It features the story of Ms. Marvel, which is a character that was actually first introduced in 2015, I think. Right? Pretty recent character. And kind of a, and of course, like there's some troglodyte on the internet who's like, oh, something woke Marvel, something, right? Because, wow, it's a character about a young woman who's of Pakistani heritage. She's Muslim. Like, yeah, you're right. If you're a shithead, you think that this is all just wokeism. But it's actually...
This is me as a comic creator, being a nerd, created by G. Willow Wilson and artists...
A Seattleite.
And artists... Adrian Alfona and Jamie McKelvey. And
the reason I say that about G. Willow Wilson is because when I got my first collection of the Ms. Marvel comic, I went to Phoenix Comics in Seattle, in Capitol Hill, Seattle, to get it on. It was free comic book day, and of course I paid money like you do. And
as you do.
I bought this collection, and they had a guest signing by G. Willow Wilson. And I was like, wow, that's really cool, man. She came all the way to Seattle to do this for free comic book day. And someone was like, I mean, she lives here, dude. She didn't have to go that far. So it's that weird thing when you're like, oh, wow, I live in the same city as someone. Like, yeah, no shit. So does everyone. But it was cool because I actually got to go and she signed it. I have an autographed Ms. Marvel, whatever the first trade, I believe it is, in hardback. But yeah, so...
And that's the episode, everybody. Have a good week.
Andrew talks about his knickknacks. So the show, it's I want to talk about it because I think it's actually really cool. I really like it. I know there's people who probably... I heard it wasn't as popular at first. I don't know how it is at completion. Or at least there weren't as many people watching it, although that's as much advertising and everything else as anything else. Right. But I want to talk about it because I actually think this show does a lot of really cool things that we have not seen before in an MC universe. And it kind of goes back to the comic also doing something that was not necessarily that prominent, kind of characters and stories that we don't normally see.
And on a nerdy level, it actually does a lot of legwork for shifting and perhaps pushing the MCU forward.
Sorry, I know there's something we're going to talk about at the end, but we're going to wait to the end to talk about it.
And we should also stop, and before we go any further...
Oh, dude, yeah, spoilers. Yeah.
For the Ms. Marvel Disney Plus show.
Yes.
Obviously.
I just want to start by saying, someone made this comment like, look, on its face, this is a show about a high school kid who's kind of nerdy, who finds herself developing great powers and then has to learn great responsibility. Right. I mean, there's actually a really interesting comparison to Spider-Man because on that very, like I always joke that, Doctor Strange, the movie, is just Iron Man with magic. I'm not saying this is the same as Spider-Man, but there are similarities, right? We have this high school kid who's kind of dorky and adorably so, right? And she discovers his power, except the important part is that who she is and her powers and everything are very different than Peter Parker, right?
She does not shoot webs.
She does not shoot webs out of anything.
No.
The episode, actually, this is something I think a friend of the show pointed out to me. Like, this is a show that shows you the life of a Pakistani American. It shows her, like, going to the mosque. It shows, the inside of a mosque during stuff.
It shows the joy of the culture. And I think a lot of media that is trying to emphasize, othered cultures and classes and peoples in TV shows tend to make it really serious and sober. Mm-hmm. What this does and how it succeeds, even though it maybe doesn't go into like super deep historical accuracy and all that kind of stuff. Obviously, there's superpowers and stuff.
Right.
But despite all that, it shows, and this sounds horrible to say, it shows Muslim people as human beings.
It's normal people.
As normal people. And like I didn't realize, again, as a cis white male, right? And then it shows my my ignorance and my privilege. It showed me how much that was missing from media. Mm-hmm. To the point where, and I'm going to speak about the show in general here, but like this is, I think since Avengers 2012, this is like the most energized, fun, and engrossing MCU project I have seen. I was caught up in this show more than, like I said, than anything else I've seen in a long time. Now, I've enjoyed most of other MCU stuff I've seen, but like this is the first time I'm like, I'm invested. Maybe not Avengers. I could say maybe the first Guardians movie. I was like, oh, this is like breathing new life into this stuff, right? Mm-hmm. But this brought an energy that I didn't even know was missing. It's one of a couple shows that are actually sort of emphasizing Middle Eastern and
Southwest Asian,
exactly,
and North African. Swana is the term I've heard.
It's one of multiple shows. I'm also thinking of Never Have I Ever, which highlights Indian culture in a very relatable and even though it's a comedy, a very naturalistic way. As a person that isn't exposed to a lot of that, like I watch these shows and I'm like, this is what the world needs. More of this, please, right? And it was just, I wish it was more episodes. Not only because of that representation, but because I loved the character.
Yeah, well, I'm going to go and just to say, I think they got, good characters, but like great, the people they had to portray, Kamala Khan, her like super friend,
Bruno. We don't talk about Bruno.
God, sorry. They make a joke every episode about how one guy can't remember his name, and I'm like, oh shit, I've forgotten what his actual name is. And then her family, her brother, her sister, her parents, her dad. I think all of them. Like,
they're all wonderful.
They all have like, and there's so many scenes where they kind of show that like, independent of her being this new superhero, mm-hmm. she's also part of this family. And they do family antics. I think the scene I'm thinking of it's in the last episode. So this is obviously a spoiler, where her mother now knows that she has this power. And so they come back to America after a side quest, which we'll talk about, and they go to talk. She's going to tell her family, hey, by the way, I have the superpower. I'm this person. And she says, hey, I'm the light girl. That's, Nightlight. And everyone kind of like, oh, wow. And she's like, wait, you all knew, right? And then it's this whole thing about like, well, your mother told me, her father. And then, of course, he's like, well, and of course, he told your father, and I heard it because he was on speakerphone. It was like this really cute family scene that makes perfect sense in any family. So yeah, there was a family story. There was a relationship between siblings, between parents, and like even in the first episode, you see the conflict that she wants to go to Avenger Con, and I think that's an important part of what I really liked about it. It wasn't just
it's a story about legacy as well, right?
Yes, in a weird way, like because it's called Miss Marvel, and there's certainly that's not actually the legacy we end up dealing with, although.
I mean, we do kind of
a little bit.
Spoilers.
So yeah, so I just it's what a like I want to say that just in the fact of having this great cast and these kind of fun moments that are, you know, sprinkled throughout as a superhero story, but there's also just family stories and of families that we as Americans are not used to seeing. Unless you watch a lot of, you know, South Asian movies and television, right?
One thing I want to talk about briefly, and I don't know if it's really a topic of conversation, but I do want to point it out because I think it's something that's really hard to capture. And that I think the shows that do capture it actually become staples of generations, which is actually casting and writing teenagers. Obviously, I want to say it's very naturalistic dialogue, and they cast actors that are very good at what they're doing. Now, I'm sure they're not all teenagers, but I know at least some of them are. And they're not even speaking naturalistically. They're using a technique, I don't know how to describe it. It's like, it's naturalistic dialogue as prescribed by TV and film, right? Mm-hmm. There's a cadence, there's a rhythm that the way these characters are speaking doesn't feel elevated. It doesn't feel like a Kevin Smith movie or like Gilmore Girls or something like that, where they're all just kind of like super smart. They're making mistakes and they're being selfish and they're being petty, but they're also being clever and fun. That is really believable. I might have said this on a previous episode when we briefly talked about Ms. Marvel, but I'm not just saying this because I'm a Doctor Who fan, but it reminded me a lot, because I've been watching it recently, of the British show Sex Education, which is another really good example of TV writing for but of teenagers, where it's not the high drama of a CW show, I guess is what I'm saying. It's small and believable, and people are reacting in very, I can't think of a better word than naturalistic and just kind of like, you know, reactive kind of ways. I think a lot of TV shows tend to amp up teenage drama to make it Shakespearean, for lack of a better word. But it always feels small, but because of that, it always feels relatable. And it's a nice contrast to the superhero story they're telling, which does have consequences, literally world-breaking consequences. And they do a masterful job of balancing those two stories by really deft and considered writing and acting, I should say. The actors that they and we've already talked about this, but like the actors they got for all these roles. But I want to specifically point out Kamala Khan is just on point. They hired really good actors, and without that, the show would have completely fallen apart, completely. Yes. They're great. Yeah, it doesn't hurt that the actress that plays Kamala Khan, the fact that her character is a super nerd is helped by the fact that the actress is also a super nerd. Yeah. Now, the one thing I want to take a moment to talk about, that, you know, there were a lot of changes to the character, the whatever, and let's be very clear that happens quite a bit, right, in comics, because for various reasons. The most notable is that in the original comics, sorry, I'm not laughing. Kamala Khan is actually an Inhuman, right? She's affected by the Terrigen mist when it hits Jersey City, but because that there are, I believe, as Scarlet Witch points out in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, Inhuman who? There are no Inhumans in MCU, because we just pretend like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. never happened, right. Nor did the Inhumans TV show. So because of that, they give her a different origin. And quite frankly, what is interesting is they gave her a story that I think was able to tie more to, like, culturally, right? So they introduced an enemy or a villain from Marvel history, I guess, clandestine. It's weird. In the show, I keep hearing clandestines, like people that are secretive, and I Googled it to find out that, the original Marvel, it is clandestine. And I was like, oh, and of course it's very different. Like, it's the same idea that they're descended from Jinn. But I think other than that, it's just different. So, like, her new origin is still rooted in Marvel Comics. Like, that's the interesting thing. They did the due diligence there. But also rooted in something that is, you know, that feels like it has more ties to the culture, like, you know, Muslim culture. It runs the dangerous line of being maybe stereotypical. Oh, sure. But they pull it off, generally speaking. I mean, as a white dude, they pull it off.
Right.
But,
It's one of those things where I don't know. Like, I can't comment on whether like it was done effectively. But at least to me, there was something about it that like, oh, it was different, but it didn't feel like ham-fisted, like they made something up. Right. They were able to tie it to something else that already existed that felt like maybe that could be appropriate.
Part of that, I think, is that they immediately rooted it in lore with the introduction of clandestine, whatever, right?
Right.
Censor. They quickly sort of create the rules of what this sort of extra dimensional sort of race means in an MCU context. That they are people out of dimension, for lack of a better word, trying to get back home or trying to just it's a little convoluted, but that's what superhero stories are.
Well, and I think the one of the things they do is there's always this, when you have a superhero universe like they do, is there's that instinct, which we see a lot of, filling in like mythology with like, oh, actually that was just someone with superpowers, right? That's a common thing to do. I mean, obviously the Thor and everything, but like the other gods, they do that too. They also do it to historical figures. They're like, oh, this person was actually whatever hero. So I think it works. And here what they reveal is that there are these people from like another dimension that have been around for a while, and that people kind of interpreted them, and their what they do is being Jinn. Right. I think that was the understanding I took away from it, is like, look, these are extra dimensional creatures, but that, early humans that encountered, or not early,
gave
but like,
them a name,
humans from a couple thousand years ago gave them that
much
name.
Like the character Apocalypse in the movie X-Men Apocalypse.
Wow. Good.
They were
good
like,
sweep.
Yeah, like, oh, clearly he based himself on the Bible, or did the Bible base itself on him?
But I like that, and I think it for me is like the white guy watching it with very little context. I thought that was an interesting way to make her character, replace the Inhuman, like, I got my powers from bad gas, and make it something that felt a little bit more.
Damn, I'd have a lot of superpowers right now.
Well, I mean, that's why I hate that it's like, oh, you got hit by the magic gas and now you have superpowers. And while we're here, let's also talk about the other thing they changed. Cue the music if you want. But this is actually a thing that now she's not an Inhuman, because MCU has no Inhumans. However, we've already seen one reference to the X-Men in MCU stuff, and that was in Doctor Strange. Now we have our second, where at the very end of the series we have Bruno say, hey, look, I was trying to figure stuff out, and I think I know why. Like, it's not just anyone in your family, it's specifically you. Because
Kamala's brother was like, why don't I have a superpower?
Right.
And he's like, yeah, why don't you?
And they kind of throw that oh, well, you have a genetic mutation. And I love they say that. They don't say mutant, but then they play the goddamn theme from that Turkish detective show or whatever, or Hungarian
the theme
show.
From X-Men 97 or whatever it's going to be called. Yeah.
I just like, which someone, actually I saw someone on the internet who made the internet on like Twitter or a website who made this comment that, had this character been created like 15 years earlier, she would have just been a mutant anyway. But because she was created in 2013, when there was like this like very anti stuff that Fox has. Well, no, it's not. Yeah. It was anti-Fox.
No, it's racism. Go ahead and say it. Let's call it what it is. It was also anti-Fantastic Four.
Well, yeah. And anti-whatever else Fox still had at that point.
Just Fantastic Four and X-Men, yeah.
But like, there's this idea that that like the character may very well have been a mutant back had it been written at a different time, but because of the politics, she became an Inhuman. And now
I have heard from sources, I think that source might be Kyron Silva of Taurus Comics, that she was intended, like G. Willow Wilson wanted her to be a mutant. Mm. So, but they're like, no, exactly for the reasons you outlined.
We don't do mutants anymore.
I'm like, well, yes, you do. Yes, you do.
No, we do, yeah.
Because Inhumans apparently are not a foundation to build a house upon.
Right. So, but I think it works as a way to kind of introduce the idea of mutants, and whether they ever do anything with that. I mean, they're going to do something. Who knows what they're going to do?
Honestly, they could, and I don't mean to diminish the impact of that this has on the MCU, but it is kind of like a one-off line at the end of the last episode of the series. They could ignore it. They could write it off. They could find any way they want out of it. I say that not because I'm cynical, but because they've done that before. They basically erased the existence of the Inhumans.
Right. I mean,
and they pushed that hard.
But only in that one show, right? Or the 2 shows. Sorry, I forget that Inhumans was a show, and now the realization that Anson Mount was Black Bolt is like, wait, what?
Excuse me, Blackagar, Boltagar, whatever his fucking name was.
Boltagar, right? It's almost like part of me wants to go watch it because he's so great, and I'm like, but I don't.
He is great.
I hear the show is actually awful.
I don't know.
Look, I mean, everyone I know who's seen it has been like, no, it's actually painful.
Let us know in the comments.
But I think that works is even if it just is that one-off thing, or if it just becomes a thing where sometimes people show up who have powers because they're mutants.
I don't mean to be an asshole.
Oh, please.
I take my time to watch things. Mm-hmm. And the day that the final episode went up, I got no fewer than like 12 texts from friends going like, did you watch the finale of Ms. Marvel?
I was one of them.
And I'm like, okay, so mutants show up, right?
When so many people text you, you know what it is.
Yeah. Like, no one said anything. But I figured it out. The X-Men dude. We need to text the X-Men dude.
You are the X-Men dude.
I love you guys. Thank you so much for thinking of me.
I didn't even think of that.
And it doesn't bother me. The spoilers are dumb. I don't give a shit about the spoilers. But it was funny. It was very funny. And the way they introduced it was really cool. I like that. And honestly, like, I kind of like... I'm not saying she's the first mutant, but being introduced to the MCU, what a better ambassador for mutant kind than Ms. Marvel. It's funny, thinking back through the series, how they were able to do a really good job setting up, cultural oppression, cultural othering, right? Like, it's the best avenue to introduce this idea.
So, like, even if they don't do the main mutant story, at least they've given you an idea of what that story is about, and it's racism.
Racism, yeah, basically, yeah. Prejudice, general prejudice, yeah. The interesting thing, also, we talk about sort of subverting tropes and expectations. Mm-hmm. I'm going to ask you a question that I think is a really good indication of another reason why the show is so good. Who's the bad guy?
Damage control. Or at least that one lady.
The government?
No, I mean, like, that is a thing where by the end of the show, the bad guy is clearly not the whole organization, but that whatever lady that in charge of the Jersey City branch, she's the bad guy. Like, she is
even by governmental standards, by the way, by the standards of the man, she's a bad guy.
I mean,
because she breaks protocol.
I guess. That's
her boss told her to stand down.
Yeah, I mean, that's the fair point. I'm not going to make a comment about but she's just acting like a cop.
She's not. Yeah, she went full rigs, right?
But like
when we needed a Murtaugh.
But really, like, because that's a good point that you get these characters that are introduced, the clandestines, and you're thinking, and at first they seem like they're helpful, but of course like maybe they're not going to be helpful, and then you're like, oh, maybe they're the bad guys, and for a couple episodes they're the bad guys, and then in the 5th episode you see their leader kind of like basically sacrifice herself to stop badness,
right. The end of the world,
and so it's like, okay, you guys weren't really bad guys, you were just kind of selfish, shitty people.
Yeah,
but you weren't like I'm gonna cause harm to people with great intention. Well,
I mean, kind of, but then they saw the light. Props.
That a moment,
right?
The light.
Government lady didn't see that. Yeah,
they saw the light because that was their shtick.
Oh, damn it!
Yeah, they
fell into that one. Fell backwards into that one.
Photic powers. So yeah, no, I think that was a neat part of it, and but also the one thing I do want to take a moment to also acknowledge that look, this every time I talk about this, I feel like I sound stupid. Look, until 2 years ago, I did not know what partition was, right? And it wasn't until Doctor Who did an episode, I'm like, holy shit! And now for this show to then do it again, we're like, look, this is fucked, and look at how this harmed like a culture or cultures, and for that to center the part of the narrative around that in a way that reminds you that these are people who suffered because of this, and to tie their story to it, I really appreciate that, because it's I think it's another one of those situations where, like, as an American, I have a lot more respect, but also just like sympathy is not quite right, but like a lot more understanding for both India and Pakistan, and I guess Bangladesh, because I believe that's also one of the, if I was reading about it, they always talk about Pakistan and India, but I believe Bangladesh because it was Eastern Pakistan basically. Right. They're all like targets of this vicious partition. So yeah, I like that. And also the British are bad guys too. That's always a plus.
Yeah. We talk a lot about this with shows recently, with obviously this talking about The Partition. We talk about with Doctor Who, kind of highlighting that as well in a very good episode. We talk about The Watchmen, highlighting Tulsa Massacre, right?
Along with Lovecraft Country as well.
Yes. There's a part of me that's like, oh, finally, how do we reach stupid white people through TV? But like, it's not that. It's serving the underserved American education system. Where like everybody's learning about this in their own way, right? Some people might have already known about it and are like maybe getting more details, or at least are able to engage in conversation with other people. Other people are learning about it for the first time. I mean, part of it is I'm a Californian. I don't know much about everything to the east of me, right? And like that's important to know because it creates a cultural context. It creates also a sense of, God, it's going to sound real dire, but like sense of patriotism. Like I know more about my country now.
Well, in this case, about another country. But yeah.
Well, yeah, in this case, sure.
I don't know if you know, India and Pakistan are not in the United States.
Wait, what? We should like make them
Bollywood
states,
is
bro.
in fact not Hollywood. Sorry.
It's highlighting a bunch of issues that relate to big conversation points that everybody needs to be engaging with. It's not, these aren't battles necessarily because it's history and it's been done, but issues of racism, issues of colonialism, issues of prejudice and oppression. The way a country and a culture moves forward is through discussion, awareness, and reparations even, right? Like there's a lot of discussion to be had there. And if fiction is the way to make these issues known, and it seems to be the case because they're doing it and doing it well, then so be it. Because God knows the K through 12 system isn't doing it. And I think it does relate to being an American in a way, because there are a lot, especially like where I live in Sacramento, we have a really big Pakistani and Indian population, right? A big Muslim population. And it's important to know this stuff because, as was highlighted in the show, they say every Pakistani family has a partition story. Like it or not, it is part of the American story now. I can only be thankful for shows like this to highlight that story so we can have more context for engaging with people and respecting people. Like, that's the thing, It shrinks the O of othering, right? In a way that hopefully we don't become others and we become just, citizens, friends, and neighbors. And man, that's a lofty idea that I've just brought up, but I talk about this with Ms. Marvel. We talked about Doctor Who. I would even say more lighthearted shows like Never Have I Ever on Netflix, bringing attention in a lighthearted and fun and relatable way to other cultures, to non-white standard, what some people would say default cultures, is really important. Because guess what? Everybody's a person and everybody's normal. But also everybody's broken. Yeah, and finding that relatability is the important aspect of art here, rather than deifying it or fetishizing it. And I think Ms. Marvel does a really good job of balancing.
And I think making like when I started, I said that a lot of this story there's a lot to it that is very similar to something like Spider-Man. And I think in that regard, to say here's a story that you understand, but here's how we're going to put things that you maybe are less familiar with, so you can appreciate how they're not that different than what you understand.
Ms. Marvel is an undeniably American story because of her parents and the stories and the tribulations they lived, as well as because the fact that she can shoot crystal fists out of her hand. And
I would say, and I think about it, like the ending where they have basically everyone grouping around her, saying, kind of protecting her. And I think about that. It reminds me of like that. I think it was Spider-Man 2. The original Raimi one, where like all the people are helping Spider-Man. They put his mask back on. Like there's the same idea of like the community realizes that this hero is in fact one of them and is here for them. And that's, again, very relatable. It's a similar idea, but now in a different context it's easy for me to relate to and say, yeah, this is what I like. These people, this culture are not that different than what I already know. Which I think that's important. Maybe it's because I'm the kid that grew up watching Star Trek, but I think these kind of like seeing, people relate in relatable ways is how we, build bridges and stuff, how we come together as a world, which is hard in a world where it seems like right now the opposite is what everyone wants to do. Not everyone, what a lot of people want to do, right? A lot of people want to divide. They want to
let's say a vocal minority.
I mean, who knows?
Who also have a lot of power.
It's really, I don't know. But we'll either way. So,
God, you're going to say we'll find out. And that's
we'll find out. Well, strap in.
Let's, with that in mind, let's just back off the cultural criticism pedal here and just focus on nerdy shit. They changed her powers. She went from stretchy shapeshifter
to photic lensing or whatever, to wrapping herself in hard light. Right.
That's what they call me.
And it's one of those things where it's a change. And, there's a lot of discussion as to why that was done. A lot of speculation. I know some people say, well, because then she looks too much like Mr. Fantastic if they do bring him back, which, I mean, clearly they already did it in one context. At the same time, I don't know if stretchy powers are that interesting for me, so I'm kind of glad that they tried something different. And it may have been that I like the theory that it's because they spent time testing it and they just couldn't make it not look like shit.
Honestly, I wouldn't doubt that.
Because stretchy powers have always been kind of like sus, when you're like,
it works great in books, man.
Ooh, that looks awful.
But they did play the homage that they gave it in the last episode was fucking perfect, where she said the word
EMBIGGENING, right? And they show her doing similar things to
everything except for her torso and head got big. And it's pretty great. She stretched Armstronged her way through the finale.
And the one thing is, and they've also kind of acknowledged that we have not seen all of her powers yet, as we get in the post-credit sequence where they finally get to do what was one of my favorite jokes from the first issue. So for those who haven't read it, in the first issue, when she gets hit by the black bull, the magic gas, she has this whole weird kind of not dream, but this whole
power surge.
Well, she has this weird sequence where she imagines herself turning into Miss Marvel, and then when she breaks out of her Captain Marvel. Well, I think but she turns into Miss Marvel, the original 1980s sexy version,
black leotard. Yeah.
She even explicitly says she wants to be the sexy version, or something like that. And then when she comes out of her Terrigen casing,
hair, white, basically,
she looks like that, and she panics because she realizes, oh my gosh, I had the power to look like anything I wanted, and I had the power to turn into whatever I want. I turned into a white lady, right? And so they do that as a gag at the end of the episode. Where
I was gonna say, I was really surprised. It was actually really ironic. We were watching it, and my wife Nicole had read the first trade as well, and she's like. She brought it up. It's like, I guess they're not going to do that gag. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess that's that could be in bad taste. And then, boom, they at the very end they pay homage to that.
Right, and what they're telling you is that whatever she can do, clearly her powers are growing or changing or something. We'll find out in probably the Marvels, right? Which I believe is her next appearance. I think overall, I really appreciate the show. I really enjoyed it.
Very good stuff.
It's weird because maybe it didn't feel as advertised going in. It wasn't the big, it wasn't Loki and Falcon and Winter. It wasn't like the big, bench plates. It actually felt like they said they were filming it. They didn't really have a release date, and all of a sudden they're like, and by the way, Miss Marvel's coming out in 2 months. And you're like, all right.
And next we have She-Hulk, which I think there's actually there's a parallel kind of approach to this. I remember seeing there were leaks from the Miss Marvel set. I'm like, it looks fine, I don't know. And the trailers, I don't even remember trailers from Ms. Marvel. And people reacted lukewarmly to, I don't know if that's an adverb or not, but to the She-Hulk trailer. It looked good to me. I'm excited, but it could be another kind of diamond in the rough, which is great.
And we'll see.
We will see. The only way to judge is to see it.
To me, it's maybe it's because they're able to do a lot more kind of just personal, local, this is a story about a girl from Jersey City as opposed to here's Avengers saving the world, right? Here's, whoever's saving the world. She saved the world, but really she saved Jersey City.
Yeah. And there's an interesting contrast to this phase of Marvel where the the shows are doing very grounded things. Maybe Loki's an exception there, but
well, it was grounded to just somewhere fucking, like to extra dimensional hoo-ha, right?
Yeah, and then the movies are doing the big grand gestures.
Yes,
right, but also very experimental in their own ways. We'll probably talk about that more when Andrew finally sees Thor, Love and Thunder.
Love and Thunder.
And when that drops on Disney
on the
Plus.
Disney Plus. Yeah. So anyway, Miss Marvel. If you have the Disney Plus, I recommend checking it out.
We both do, and it is a double
EMBIGGENING
double brackets. Oh god. So, if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comments or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can find us on other social media as well, such as Twitter and Instagram, where you can find us at respective handles. On Twitter, you can find Andrew tweeting about tabletop role-playing games at ProfoundDark, and you can find me at dbethel. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at ProfoundBrick and me and my work at dbethelcomics.
While you're at our website at forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page, which you may already be familiar with because you're listening to the show on our YouTube page, because that's what we do now. So if you're there, if you go to our YouTube, like and subscribe, or as they say in the business, ring that bell.
We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4. And they're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod of the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review. Whether a text review or using the proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms. I've got important stuff to talk about.
Oh, really?
Yes.
What?
I have finished reading the official novelization of Highlander.
Oh, and who wants to live forever?
Well, I want the experience to live forever, so you know what I'm doing now?
What?
I'm reading a book called A Kind of Magic, The Making of Highlander.
Okay.
And do you know what?
What?
It's an amazing book. This dude did amazing. It's written by a Scot. He did incredible research. It was released in 2020. He got Russell McKay, the director of the original Highlander, on the phone. He got Christophe Lambert on the phone. He got.
Don't tell me he got Sean Connery on the phone.
No, he did not actually. No, actually, this is a perfect way to end this. He reached out to Sean Connery. He got Connery's assistant, and Connery's assistant said, "Sean Connery is retired. We are not answering questions at this time."
Oh, so he's still alive at the time?
Yeah. Okay. It's not presented as an oral history, but it's definitely approached that way. Just contacting all these people that are involved and that are still alive, and getting a lot of good information out of them. Like it's a surprisingly an academic level research kind of book, and I'm like, this is everything I wanted.
Well, there
it's
you
so
go.
good. It's so good. And the main thing I've learned, Andrew, is that Christophe Lambert, blind as a bat, he needs thick-ass Coke bottle glasses to survive. And so apparently it's just a matter of rote memorization of positioning and movement to get through scenes without that stuff, which is horrifying if you think of how many scenes
with a
he
sword.
filmed of people, throwing swords at each other. So it's great. I'm having a Highlander summer, and I love everything about it. So I'm not sorry.
Oh, it's good. I'm glad that someone appreciates that.
And to make it worse, I'm having I should actually say the accurate description of my summer is I'm having a Highlander and Star Trek summer. And to me, the only thing that can make it better is to maybe sprinkle a little willow on top. Little willow. And that's coming soon, so I'm very excited. So until you sprinkle your favorite franchise on top, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
And they buried him with the toaster?
With the toaster died with him. All right, let's go.
Oh, shit. The toaster of leadership.
I'll .mp4 you into oblivion, sir.
All right, good
Damn.
talk. Well, because what happened?
Did you make it yourself?
Yeah, I did, because I have a toaster. I have the racist toaster in my office.
Wait.
Just for that, I'm going to use 4 bowls for 4 separate fucking things.
I love it.
How is that different from normal?
It's not.
That's my secret, Cap.
I always use 4 bowls.